Ah, Dizzy, everyone's favourite heroic little egg. Created by the Oliver twins, this positive and plucky little fellow, who is a walking egg, had a load of great adventures for the likes of the Spectrum, Commodore 64 and Amiga. In fact, Dizzy was kind of everywhere and on everything for a good few years. Even turning up on some kind of not licensed by Nintendo but still officially released NES games, as well as the Mega Drive and the Atari ST. It was basically, you could get Dizzy everywhere. But then, by the time we were deep into the era of the 16-bit consoles, the time of Dizzy was all but over. But for those of us who had the joy of playing the Dizzy games, we all know that the adventures of an egg who searches castles and treetops and meets a range of monsters and trolls is a special one. Dizzy, Prince of the Yolk Folk was first released in 1991 and developed by Big Red Software, so this meant that the Oliver twins kind of said, yes, we allow this to be a Dizzy game, but they weren't directly involved in making it. Or at least that's my understanding. They didn't get down to the nitty-gritty with it. It was originally released almost like a bonus game as part of a compilation, and as such is a short game and can be completed in about 30 minutes or so. This may sound horrifically short by modern standards, but it comes from an era where a shorter game of this length was a satisfying play. In the days where you might have some passwords here, and occasionally you might have something where you can save on a game using a spare floppy disk. Generally speaking, platformer games or adventure games like this, you'd have to sit there from start to finish, and so 30 minutes meant that you could sit down and confidently know that you'll get through it. In fact, back in the day, this was a breath of fresh air compared to the punishing games of the era where you may have to complete a 3 or 4 hour game in one sitting. I'm looking at you, Sonic the Hedgehog 1. In this Dizzy game, much like his other adventures, you walk about and jump and do some platforming, but primarily, the game is an adventure game. You need to collect objects and interact with characters who you meet along the way. I love that Dizzy Prince of the Yolk Folk actually starts with you trapped in a cave. Fortunately, you find the 3 objects right in there with you and burn your way out of danger. This is a great way of teaching the player exactly how the mechanics of the game work. The game quickly gives you a few obstacles that will limit your progress. There is a troll guarding an entrance to a castle, and later on in the game you meet an evil clone of Dizzy, who has green gloves, who mirrors your actions to stop you picking up the key item. There are a few hazards and enemies that you can run into who cause damage, but realistically, there's very few ways to get killed in the game. If you don't complete the Zombie Dizzy puzzle correctly, for example, you'll get dropped to your doom. Now, other than that, the biggest risk will be falling into water in one of 3 main locations, and that will be down to mistimed or ill-advised jumps. So there is an inside of a cave which you come across right at the beginning of the game, and I got killed there more than I'd like to admit. Then there is outside a castle and then crossing the river. There is a boat that goes back and forth across this river, and getting the right timing is once again something which seems so simple, and yet I get killed there more often than not on this game. Now, you do cross this river a bunch of times to go back and forth between locations if you want to finish it, so you do need to get used to making that jump. The graphics of the Amiga version, which is the one I've played for this review, are detailed and colourful. Definitely got a lot more going on here than, say, the Spectrum version, but nowhere near as much as the remake. And yes, I believe this is the only Dizzy game to get a remake in the more modern era, but even that was like 12 or 14 years ago, something insane. It's very much in the same vein as Magic Land Dizzy on the Amiga for this version though. To complete the game, you have to go on a fantastic little fetch quest. You find the items and where you use them and who to give them to. You can only carry 3 items at a time, and along the way there are a few red herring items that you don't actually need to collect to complete the game. This includes a carpet, which I was certain would be like a flying magic carpet to take me across the cloud section of the game, because you do jump about in clouds. And you have to keep moving because otherwise you start to sink through them, because that's how clouds work, at least in cartoons. One thing that you do need to collect are all of the cherries that are dotted through the game. Even if you do everything else on the game and wake up the Sleeping Beauty in Daisy, the game isn't won until you have every last cherry. I learned this the hard way. There are a couple of hidden cherries on the Amiga version, and I don't think they're hidden on every version, but on the Amiga one you do sometimes have to look in bushes to find them. But you do need to find all of them if you want to see the final cutscene. It's not the end of the world though if you miss a cherry, as the game is very neatly compact. There's enough here to explore and have fun with, but it's possibly the smallest of the Dizzy games. I don't mind this at all, as some of them are just a bit too big to have a good playthrough, and some of them it just has you going around. That one with all the treetops you're going through, I get lost quite easily. On the Amiga version of Dizzy Prince of the Yolk Folk, you'll have to get used to using the up button for jump, and coming back to Dizzy today, it took me a minute to get used to Dizzy's unique way of jumping and rolling. Sure, I'm an old hand when it comes to using the up on the joystick or up button on the D-pad to doing the jump, and you do that on fighting games anyway, but it was his jumping and rolling a little bit. It's always going to be the same amount of distance, and so you need to factor that into where you land. There's not really a sense of running and building up momentum into a jump, so for a few jumps where you have to land precisely, like the one over the river where you're landing on a boat, you have to make sure you're in the right position. Because you don't build up any momentum by running into a jump, you can walk right up to the edge of a platform and jump from there to make sure you'll make the full distance. And so sometimes it's best not to give it a run up and just to creep along to the very edge, almost so you're overhanging it, and then just jump so that you'll definitely make it to the other side. The game is a good mix of platforming and puzzle solving, and all the characters you run into have a lot of personality. Now, I've played this on both the Amiga and the NES version, which was included on the Evercade Oliver Twins collection, and the remake of this was on the iPhone, which I got back in the day, which really annoyingly doesn't work on modern iPhones, and you can't download it anymore. And as well as iPhones, you can't even get it on Android phones anymore. It was available, but I couldn't even get it to work on an emulator. But I did find that there is a PC remake, which I think is a community build, and I've already decided I'm going to take a proper look at this for another video, another day. So that's going to wrap things up for this video of Dizzy Prince of the Yolk Folk, which was on the Amiga for the version I've looked at, and I hope you enjoyed it. Do check out the channel because there's all kinds of videos covering all kinds of games across all kinds of platforms. I'd really appreciate if you would smash that subscribe button, and do check out the written article version of this review over at www.xstreamed.tv. And with that, from me, from everyone else, from Dizzy, stay safe, always stay extremed, and ciao for now. Boom, and I'm off the air.